scene when Tony Stark was actually trapped in space together with Nebula. So he and Nebula was just in a spaceship in the middle of nowhere in outer space, and they were running out of fuel, running out of food, running out of water, running out of oxygen. They were about to die. And in that scene, you could see the frustration, the desperation. They were waiting for something. Tony Stark gave a sort of a farewell video just in case something finds that recording, and he was ready to die. And he closed his eyes thinking he was about to die because he ran out of hope. He ran out of hope. That means for the longest time they were prolonging it, they were dragging it. They were hoping for a rescue. They were hoping that someone would find them, but apparently they ran out of supply, but none of those rescuers that they were hoping for actually arrived. So he just closed his eyes and thinking he'll just die and drift into nothingness. You know, sometimes because of the difficulty of this life, we think that, okay, if there's really no hope in this life, then maybe it's just easier to die. But actually, as long as we have hope, we want to cling on to that. As long as there is hope, we want to keep on living because we know that there's just so much joy. There's just so much in living that as long as we can, we hold on to it. That's what hope does. Welcome to week 30 of our daily Bible devotions. This week we have been studying the epistles of Peter, the first and second letters of Peter. Let's start looking at 1 Peter chapter 1 verse 3. It says there that it talks about a living hope that we can get through Jesus' resurrection. There's this living hope, not just hope to live, but there is a living hope. Meaning when we talk about hope, it's about anchoring your life into something. When there is hope, there is always an object of hope. And here in chapter 1, verse 3 of 1 Peter, it says that our hope can be anchored on a living hope. Not just hope to live, but a living hope. And what is that living hope? Jesus' resurrection. How can that be an anchor of hope? Well, Jesus' resurrection is a great proof that death can be defeated. If death can be defeated through Jesus' resurrection, what else cannot be defeated in this life? What problem can you think of? Name it. Finances, studies, relationships, whatever difficulty you can think of. If that can be defeated, then any of those problems can be defeated as well. That is the anchor of your hope, the living hope that is Jesus' resurrection. Now in chapter 1 verse 6, as it continues, Peter says, "In this you rejoice, though now you grieve for a little while." So going back again to Jesus' resurrection, it says not just, you don't just have a living hope. In this living hope, you can rejoice, you can be happy. Though you're suffering, you can be happy. The context is, he wrote during a time of suffering. He wrote during a time of persecution. The Romans, led by the Emperor Nero, the Romans were persecuting Christians. And then it is during that time when Christians were being hunted, were being killed, were being fed to the lions, being killed in gladiator arenas. It is during that time that Peter wrote this, spoke to Christians, said, "You can rejoice." It's like, what? We're being killed and we rejoice? And he's saying, we rejoice in this living hope through Jesus' resurrection. Because now death can be defeated. Now we don't have to fear death. Now we can be happy, we can be joyful, we can be hopeful. Even though we're grieving, at the same time we can be hopeful and we can be joyful. That's amazing. In verse 21, chapter 2, verse 21, Peter continued to encourage the Christians by saying that we Christians, we are called to endurance. Why? First, yes, Jesus resurrected. He defeated death. Second, before he died and resurrected, he suffered a lot. I mean, he wasn't just killed instantly. He suffered before he died. And that suffering is actually an example for us to follow. You know, if we go back to the first 4 books of the New Testament, there are stories there about Jesus' sufferings, his passion before he died. He suffered the worst kind of torture, the worst kind of punishment anyone can ever imagine. It's the worst punishment, worst torture in history. And yet, how did he act? Did he act in anger? Did he hate the people who's trying to hurt him, who's slapping him, mocking him during that time? No. He treated them with honor. He treated them with respect. He forgave them. He prayed for them. And then Peter is saying here that because of the example that Christ left for us, we are called to endure this suffering, endure these trials, endure this grief, and we can rejoice through this, knowing that if Jesus Christ endured this, we are also called to endure it. That leads us to the principle. Jesus' life, work, and promises gives hope to face sufferings. Again, the principle is Jesus' life, work, and promises gives hope to face sufferings. So that means the way Jesus lived, what he has accomplished in the cross, what he finished there, and then the promise of resurrection after death, those things should give us hope and should allow us to face sufferings, not with a dark face, not with grumpiness, but actually to face sufferings with joy, with hope. And think about this. Can you avoid suffering in life? Think about that. Do you realize that suffering cannot be avoided in life? There will always be suffering, no matter what you believe, no matter what status in life you are, whether you're rich, you're poor, or whether you're educated or not, wherever you are, there will always be suffering. You can't avoid it. What will you choose in times of suffering? Will you choose to have hope, or will you choose to say no? Will you choose to have hope in times of suffering, or will you choose to just succumb to suffering? Will you just choose to let suffering take the best out of you? And then, speaking about choice, in chapter 4, 1 Peter chapter 4, verses 14 to 15, Peter said there, suffer for Christ, or suffer because of your sins. Those are actually the choices that we have. Since suffering is inevitable, suffering is unavoidable, you have to choose. Will you choose to be with Christ and suffer for Him, suffer for righteousness? Or will you leave God out of the equation but still face suffering because of the sins that you're doing, because of evil? Make your choice.